sevgili Pınar'a sözü veriyor olacağım. Onun moderasyonunda sevgili Tracy'yi dinliyor olacağız. Biz yani The Coaching Company olarak liderlerle bir taraftan bireysel koçluk desteği verirken bir diğer taraftan o liderlerin takımlarıyla team coaching çalışmaları yapıyoruz ve aynı zamanda liderlik gelişim programlarıyla da yine o liderlerimize ya da kurumlara desteklerimizi sürdürüyoruz. Bunun yanında bu akşam organize ettiğimiz The Curious Community yani meraklı topluluk aktiviteleriyle de kendi alanlarında gerçekten iz bırakmış, önemli deneyimler kazanmış ve hem liderliğe hem koçluğa hem de iş dünyasına ne diyelim çok güzel, inanılmaz faydalı bilgilerini aktaracağından emin olduğumuz kişileri davet ediyoruz. Ayda bir, bazen 2 ayda bir bu toplantıları yapıyoruz. Bundan sonraki toplantılarımıza da herkesi bekliyoruz. Sözü Pınar'a vermeden önce ben öncelikle Tracy'ye Tracy, welcome. Thank you very much, really, that you are being with us tonight. Thank you so much. So I will give the direction to Pınar for moderation. Thank you, Pınar, also.
Evet, sesimi açtım. Teşekkür ederim Naci. Sen çok güzel özetledin her zamanki gibi birkaç cümleyle. Ben bu kez biraz daha uzun konuşacağım senden sanırım. Ben de öncelikle herkese bir hoş geldiniz diyorum ve hemen İngilizce geçmek istiyorum konuğumuzu da katmak adına. Belki yeni sürekli hala katılanlar oluyor. Yeni katılanlar için söyleyebiliriz. The Curious Community toplantımızı yapıyoruz. Ben de The Coaching Company koçlarından birisiyim. İsmim görünüyor zaten ekranda. Bu toplantıyı modere etme fırsatını ve onurunu da verdiğiniz için ayrıca teşekkür ediyorum ben de The Coaching Company'ye deyip hemen İngilizceye dönüyorum. So once again I would like to say welcome to all our participants and to our dear guest Tracy Sinclair. And as you are all used to do things from a distance for a long time now, and this is another meeting where we are attending from all different parts of the world. Well, actually, I know that we have 3 countries and at least 3 continents in this meeting. The coaching company and our participants are mostly from Turkey. And our dear guest, Tracy Sinclair, is attending from UK. And I'm attending here from the United States. So this is going to be really a fun and exciting meeting. And before starting, I will just mention a few words about how we will handle the process. And then I will say a few words about the background of Tracy, and which she may always add on to that later, and then leave the word to her for her lecture. So about the process, first of all, we are already, I think we have started to record this session. And I'm telling this I think because it's important under the Turkish data protection law. So now I believe this serves as a notice for everyone that they know that we are being recorded. And secondly, we will be handling the session in 2 parts. So in the first part, Tracy will be presenting her speech. And then this will be followed up by a Q&A session. We are not going to be making a translation in order not to distract the process or, to have a lengthy process. We want to avoid that. And then I think, but the only thing I have to say is during the Q&A session, if anyone wants to raise a question in Turkish, then I will step in and try to translate that question for Tracy. That's the only part where we will be doing a translation. And lastly, we spoke between ourselves that if and whenever Tracy pauses, to take a breath during her speech or to give us a moment to digest what she says, if a question pops up in someone's mind, then that person can come along and just, use the raise hand button under the screen somewhere here. And then we can take the question at that time. And it will be up to Tracy whether to respond at that time or to do it later during the Q&A session. I think this is all from about the process. And let me say a few words about our dear guest, Tracy Sinclair. She's a master certified with the International Coach Federation. And she's also a supervisor, coach supervisor, a mentor coach, and an ICF assessor. And very excitingly, she has co-authored a book named Becoming a Coach that was recently published in 2020. And that book serves as a complete guide to all coaches at all different levels of skills and expertise. So maybe she can mention about that later a little bit more. And what is important for purposes of this meeting is that she works with leaders, corporate clients, and corporations, especially in leadership development. And what, you know, in today's Curious Community meeting, we will be handling matters related to the world of today's leaders and today's coaches and what happens when they interact with each other. You know that given that this is a time where there is a particular need for the leaders to be in connection, to connect closely with the leaders, with their people, with their employees, and with their colleagues, it's important that we also touch upon this matter. And I believe Tracy has something to say on this in her speech. So I think this is all for now from my part. And, you know, whenever there's a need, I may step in, as I told. So now I'm going to turn to Tracy and say once again, welcome and thanks for being here today with us. And the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Pinar and Nasi. And first of all, thank you so much for all of you, a lot of people joining us here this evening, and I really appreciate you giving your time, your evening, to spending some time with me. I'm delighted to be able to spend some time with you. And the other really important thing that I sincerely appreciate is that you are enabling me to do our session in English. If we were to do this in Turkish, it would be very hard for me. So thank you so much for allowing me to do this in English for you. And if there's anything about what I'm sharing that doesn't seem clear or you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask, as Pinar said. When I'm sharing the screen, it's a little bit harder for me to sometimes see hands going up because I can't see all of your cameras so easily. So please, I guess, Pinar, maybe you'll help me out to look if there are any hands going up. But also please feel free to come off of mute and ask a question. And the other thing I wanted to say is that we will be making a copy of these slides available to you. I believe and hope there is some useful content in these slides, which I hope to cover all of. But regardless of that, we will make a copy of them available to you afterwards so that you have all of that content for yourselves. So as Pinar said, I will share my screen in a moment and share what I hope is a wide variety of information that I believe will be useful. It's certainly very current and very relevant information about the field and the sphere of coaching today. And then when we get to the opportunity for questions and discussion, if there's anything that you'd like to explore a little bit more deeply, we could do that then. So I will share my screen and let's make a start. Just bear with me while I do that. There we go. Okay. Just moving my camera so I can see everyone more easily. So I've called this session How Coaching Supports Leaders in the New Normal, and this term has been around for a while now, and I think is an important thing to get our heads around, really, because for quite a long time when the pandemic first started, I heard a lot of conversation around the world where people were saying, when we get back to normal. And there was an assumption that things would just go back to the way they were before, after the pandemic went away. And one of the things I think that has become very clear, not just in coaching or leadership, but to many aspects of our lives in the world today, is that our lives may not totally go back to the normal that we had before, that we are all being thrust, if you like, into a new way of working and a new way of living and being. And so the whole essence of this presentation is to share with you a variety of ways that coaching could be of use to and support to leaders that are really creating that new normal for themselves as leaders and for their organisations. And there are quite a few things for us to cover. And what I don't therefore want to do is spend too much time talking about me. But the only reason I show this slide is because in the bullet points here, you will see that the word that comes up over and over again is coach or coaching. And that really is because when I came across coaching in my career in 2005, I really found that coaching as not just as a way of working, but a way of communicating was truly transformational in many aspects of our lives. And so I've chosen very deliberately to specialise and focus all of the work that I do on the various applications of coaching, whether it's in a corporate setting, in a social impact setting, in an education setting. Because I truly believe that if we think about coaching as an effective way of communicating with each other, it has a lot of potential to help us move forwards. So in terms of the actual topics that I'd love to share with you, I've got sort of 6 key areas here. First of all, to talk to you about what kinds of things are people working on in coaching, because there's been a shift from what was traditionally brought into coaching by leaders to what we're starting to see now. So that's an important place, I think, to start with. And then what I also want to cover is what role does coaching have potentially in supporting people's well-being and resilience? And then going very much to the organisational setting, how does coaching potentially inform culture in an organisation? How does coaching also very specifically add value when it comes to remote working? And then also some very topical areas on just sharing some of the research with you around how COVID has impacted the profession of coaching, what the trends are highlighting, and also what the future of coaching is currently perceived to be looking like. And in this presentation, I'm sharing information with you, some of which is drawn from ICF research. And if you wanted to dig deeper into some of that research, some of it is available via the ICF. So I'm giving you some highlights, if you like, of some of that research. And what I'm sharing with you also comes from my own experiences as a practitioner in the field, both working with leaders and also working with a lot of organisations. So if we go straight into it and we look at, first of all, what are the kinds of topics and goals and challenges that leaders bring into coaching? Well, this list here is typically pre-pandemic, the kinds of things that leaders would bring into coaching conversations. They would be typically wanting to optimize their own performance. They would be wanting to optimize the performance of their team or their department. Relationships and communication skills are always there. A lot of leaders are thinking about their next career opportunity and their promotional opportunities, and also thinking about areas where their own confidence can be enhanced, as well as that ongoing topic of how do I manage my work and my private life and get a balance. And then because coaching is also used by entrepreneurs and small businesses, often an improvement in managing a business overall is a topic that can come in. And for many years, research has shown that these are very typically the kinds of things that leaders bring into their executive coaching conversations. However, what I'm going to share with you next is the kind of thing that we have noticed is coming into coaching in the last 18 months to 2 years. And if you look at this list compared to the ones that were on the previous slide, I think you may notice a change. There are certain things that are now getting more and more of the leader's attention. And I've really sort of clustered these topics together under this general area of how leaders are having to manage the size and the pace of the change that they feel they are faced with. In some ways, you know, the pandemic and its relevant consequences to many leaders has felt almost like a tsunami of change. And even before the pandemic, some of that pace of change and that volatility was already being experienced. And so for many, the onset of the pandemic was almost like, you know, the final blow that has created in some senses quite a lot of overwhelm. So you will see here that the kinds of topics that people are bringing in are really around how do those leaders lead now? How do they lead other people when they themselves don't know what to do? How does a leader who always, in terms of the traditional identity of a leader, leads and sets direction because they know where we need to go, and suddenly now the leader doesn't know where to go, they don't know what to do. And so the whole concept of the definition of leadership and being a leader is being challenged. Many leaders, like many people, have felt lost and disengaged, losing motivation, losing engagement, also reevaluating lives. You know, in the US, for example, there has been a state that has been called the Great Resignation. I'm not sure if you've heard of that term here in Turkey, but the Great Resignation is something that is being given a title to the fact that so many people have reevaluated their lives during this period and decided that the way their life is not for them anymore. Many people have resigned from their jobs, or decided to retire early, or decided to downsize the amount that they work, or become entrepreneurs and set up a new business. And there is an enormous shortage of talent. That is being really heavily experienced in the US. We're noticing it very, very much here in the UK. I wonder how that experience, you know, is being noticed in Turkey perhaps as well. So you'll see that what the coach needs to bring to support the leader has also therefore changed. The topic areas and the things that are important to leaders are shifting. What we also notice as a result of the work that people do with coaches is that these here are typically the things that people feel are outputs from coaching. And you will see that these outputs do very, very closely align and correlate with the traditional things that people wanted from coaching. Now, the one, however, that is really, really highlighted at the moment, there are 3 of them in here, which is the expanded career opportunities, which is not so much necessarily expanded career opportunities in the same organisation, but people thinking about how else could I progress with my professional career and not have the same kind of role that I've been having so far, you know, a re-evaluation of that. We also noticed that confidence, self-belief versus self-doubt, and being more comfortable with not knowing is a very important element of the outcome of coaching at the moment, as is this element of balancing the work with life, as it were, where so many people are realizing that life is precious, and in some cases life can be short. And so how does coaching help the person to balance those things for themselves? So this is what we're seeing in coaching conversations. These are the kinds of things that are happening. Thinking then about well-being and confidence and resilience, let's just take a moment to have a look at how coaching could support this. This piece of research is lifted from the very latest ICF Global Consumer Awareness Study, which was just literally released this year. So it's the very latest data that we have available. And what you will see here is, if you have a look at the top five impacts or outcomes of coaching, you will see that number 2, very closely behind number 1, is an increase in self-esteem and confidence. So we know very, very strongly that coaching is supporting leaders to feel better. And when someone feels better, they tend to be more confident in the decisions they're making. They tend to be clearer about the decisions that they're making, because their own sense of internal platform is stronger. You'll also see that closely behind that, we've got the improved work-life balance. So coaching is being perceived as helping people to strike the right balance for them. And then you will also see in the 5th one there, increased well-being. So 35% of the people surveyed in this piece of research said that their well-being was increased as a result of coaching. So given those kinds of topics that we saw leaders are now bringing in, we noticed that coaching as a way of working with those leaders is highly effective to help ground them and underpin their sense of well-being and resilience. We also then look at a little bit about what resilience actually means, because this word could mean different things to different people. And for this, I've drawn upon a really great piece of work by a lady called Dr. Carol Pemberton, who has written a book about resilience and coaching. So if any of you are particularly interested in that, I highly recommend that. What Dr. Pemberton talks about is that, in literal terms, the meaning of the word resilience is the ability of something to return to its original state after it has been bent or stretched. So a tree, for example, is bent over in the wind, but then it can come back up again. And what we're noticing already is that things are not going back to their original state. Hence this idea of the new normal. And so this Latin root of resili, the ability to spring back or bounce back, is not necessarily so useful for us anymore. And therefore, the capacity to remain flexible in our thoughts, feelings, and behaviour when we're faced by life disruption or extended periods of pressure is that we can emerge from that difficulty stronger and wiser and more able. And so Dr. Pemberton advocates that resilience, especially nowadays, is more about bouncing forward rather than bouncing back, because we are not likely to bounce back to the same way that things were before. And coaching is a forward-moving way of communicating. It's a forward-focused dialogue, which means that coaching is lends itself very, very well to bounce forward conversations. if we also look at then, how does coaching inform organisational culture? So let's have a look at the characteristics of coaching, and there are many characteristics of coaching, but I've picked a few here that really resonated with me in terms of things that link to what I believe organisations are considering when it comes to bringing in the kind of culture that they want. And on this visual here, you'll see that it talks about how culture begins with beliefs and finds expression in behaviours. And coaching is very, very much about working with people at the level of their mindset. What is the leader's mindset around themselves as a leader? What is the leader's mindset around their ability to lead their team today? What is the leader's mindset about their future career in that organisation? And what is the leader's mindset about the organisation itself? And our mindset is comprised of many, many beliefs that we hold. And so when we as coaches are working with leaders and clients, we are very often working at the level of what beliefs do they hold and how do their beliefs inform the way they lead? How do their beliefs inform the way that their actions and their behaviours contribute to the culture of their organisation? Because culture is something that is built and reinforced with every leadership decision that we make, with every behaviour, with every action. Culture is enforced and reinforced and developed. So every leader, in a way, has an opportunity to influence that culture through the behaviours that they have. So in coaching, we are very much looking at what are these beliefs and therefore the thoughts and feelings that associate with those beliefs that underpin the leader's behaviour on a day-by-day basis in the organisation. And how can we support the leader to think about the mindset that is going to be most useful for them and their organisation, and how can they find their way to express that in order to build relationships that are effective within their organisation, and also to bring the kind of professionalism and partnerships that are going to positively inform the culture of that business. And you will see that things like partnership, this is a term that is used over and over again in coaching. As coaches, we are viewed to be intending to work in partnership with our clients in order to help them achieve the results that they want to achieve. So just in these characteristics of coaching, we are infusing almost not just the competencies of coaching, but the principles of coaching that help to inform the leader, which helps to inform the organisation. You'll also see on here, I've shared some examples of what are some of the ICF's core values, which link to collaboration, humanity, equity, being very aware of different people's contexts, having an inclusive environment, and having an environment where we can be open and share our thoughts and feelings in terms of best practice. So this list of items here are just examples, in a way, of things that are characteristics of coaching that are not necessarily the competencies of the coach, but they are characteristics of the person who is doing the coaching that can then be infused into the organisation. And then we get what in coaching we call the ripple effect. And that is where every coaching conversation is like dropping a pebble into a pond, and the ripples start to emanate, start to come out. And with every coaching conversation, with every conversation that every leader has, with every decision that every leader has, a new ripple is created. And one of the ways to most positively inform coaching culture is to get as many of those ripples flowing as possible. The ICF has also undertaken a lot of research into coaching culture. And this, if this is something that's of interest to you, there's a whole suite of research reports around various aspects of coaching culture that are available. And one of the areas that has been identified here is to highlight what are the characteristics of an organisation that demonstrates a strong coaching culture. And how these characteristics were identified is that the ICF analysed and researched many organisations that were successful and were also very successfully deploying the use of coaching in a variety of different ways within their organisation. And when those organisations were analysed, certain common themes started to emerge, and that evolved into this body of work, which identifies these 6 key characteristics. And what's interesting about this is, if any of you have ever heard of it, the ICF actually has an award process for organisations around organisational excellence for the use of coaching within that organisation, and it's called the PRISM Award. And the PRISM Award is something that happens once a year, and organisations can apply for that award process. And part of the assessment and measurement system for that award is to reflect upon the extent to which the organisation is demonstrating some of these 6 characteristics. So if any of you are in organisations, lead organisations, and are looking to start to think about how coaching could really begin to add value, not just to certain individuals, but at a more systemic level, focusing on the extent to which some of these characteristics are present or could be developed further can be a great place to start when you're thinking about how do I really leverage coaching as a strategic resource in my business or in my organisation. Let's look then at this specific area of remote working, which of course is a very common characteristic of the new normal, as we might call it. One of the things that or some of the characteristics, if you like, that we also know of coaching are noted here. And these, I believe, are very, very useful qualities to help leaders connect and navigate and lead their teams as effectively as possible when those people are working remotely. For example, coaching is viewed to be one of the ways that has the maximum possible opportunity of having an engaged and motivated workforce. Because coaching works at the level of the leader's mindset, what we notice from coaching is that when people have been coached or experienced coaching, they tend to be more motivated and engaged. And when you're working with a remote team, it's having a higher level of engagement is really, really valuable, because you don't have the opportunity to connect with them so much physically to nurture that engagement. So just using coaching as a way of connecting with your teams, with your departments, and using a coaching style. So it's not necessarily just a coaching session, but a coaching style of leadership is a way of keeping the team together, keeping the relationships going. What we also notice in coaching is the capacity for new awareness. And if you look at the definition of coaching from the ICF perspective, the definition of coaching is that it is a thought-provoking relationship that has the potential to maximize the professional and personal potential of the person concerned. And so the whole premise of coaching is that it is to create new awareness and new thought, to be open, to have an open growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. And excuse me, when we're working remotely, we have to challenge ourselves to find new and different ways to make things work, new and different ways to connect, new and different ways to update each other, new and different ways to belong and feel that we belong to the team. And coaching as a style of communicating has a very high capacity for creating new ideas, new thought, new awareness. Coming from that, we also have the fact that when we have new ideas and new awareness, we also will often find that coaching encourages self-awareness. So when we are coached, we tend to learn more about ourselves. We learn more about our strengths. We learn more about the things that challenge us. We learn more about what can get in our way. And we learn more about our tolerances. And therefore, when someone is coached, the level of emotional intelligence can increase. And that is where enhanced relationships can also come in. So if the leader can use coaching skills, a coaching style with their team, we can increase engagement, we can expand awareness, we can grow self-awareness and emotional intelligence, and therefore we can have a better way of co-creating solutions together, rather than it having to be the leader that is burdened with having to know everything. What we also see is that very often there is a higher correlation with engaged employees to accountability. So an engaged employee is more likely to be accountable for their delivery than a disengaged employee. And so through higher engagement, we're more likely to have people who are more accountable. And when we are working remotely, it's very helpful to the leader that they can have the confidence to know that their staff and their teams are being accountable for the work that they're doing, even though we can't necessarily see them all the time. And then, of course, finally, we've got these two areas of connection and confidence, which we know are very common outputs from coaching. If we then also go to a piece of research that I've pulled here from a great report, which was actually done in 2018, and this piece of work was done in conjunction with the Human Capital Institute, and it was which is where the ICF does all of their coaching culture related research, is that what was identified was a very, very strong relationship between the use of coaching and an organisation's ability to handle change more effectively. And one of the things that research tends to indicate is that typically we don't handle change very well. Yeah, the majority of change initiatives either fail or are not totally successful. And the organisations that were identified as high performing, you'll see this, the column that says HPO, that stands for high performing organisation. The organisations that were identified as high performing when it comes to change highlighted that these were the top 8 activities that had the most positive impact to effective change. And you will see that some of them are in bold, item 1, number 2, number 6, and number 8. So half of these 8 activities relate directly to coaching. And let's face it, we are navigating more change now than we have probably ever done in our lifetime. And so this relationship between change and coaching means that coaching is once again showing itself as a very, very useful way of supporting organisations through to finding and establishing their new normal. If we then go to look at specifically COVID, how has COVID affected coaching? Well, this is again a very recent piece of work. It literally just came out at the very end of last year, and it's looking at how coach practitioners around the world have reported the impact on them in terms of income around through the pandemic. And the dark blue is what people reported most recently. And the lighter blue is how people reported this when the pandemic first started in the middle of early 2020. And you will see that in every case, the dark blue, i.e. the recent one, has gone down, which means that less coaches are saying that they have reduced income now compared to in 2020, which is showing then that there is an upward trend, that coaching did get negatively impacted by the pandemic in 2020, but there is now a trend of recovery, that is now coming back, and the income is coming back up as organisations are gathering themselves and starting to find their way forward. You'll also see here a more general graph around the overall impact on coaching of COVID. And once again, you will see that, for example, in 2020, 25% of those surveyed said that that COVID had a very significant negative impact. And you'll see that in 2021, that is going down. Yeah. And once again, where there was actually quite a lot of people in 2020 said that there was limited impact, but even that is going down. Yeah. So what we're seeing again is these two pieces of research are aligning with each other, that there is a perception that the impact on income is now less, and the impact on coaching generally is now less, which means that there is a sign of recovery in terms of the use of coaching as a really valuable tool. And then finally, for the final section, I'd like to just share a few thoughts on the future of coaching. And this is such a big topic, we could talk all night just about the future of coaching. So I'm going to share a few thoughts, and then I'll pause and see if you would like to enter into some questions or some dialogue. This graph gives you a snapshot of the size of the coaching profession at the moment. Some of these figures are a little bit difficult to quantify in a way, because this figure of 71,000 coach practitioners is just people who called themselves coach practitioners, where there are probably hundreds of thousands of people actually out there doing some kind of coaching. But the couple of things to really highlight here is, first of all, the growth of the use of coaching by managers and leaders in an organisation. It's a very, very large growth area, that coaching is not just the role of an external coach, but also this really, really high percentage, 85% of organisations surveyed here that believe that it's very, very important that a coach has some kind of qualification, which in an unregulated marketplace is very important. So this is where something like an ICF credential or ICF membership can be a very strong quality assurance mechanism for organisations wanting to buy coaching services. So having very, professionally trained and qualified coaches is perceived as very, very important. What we also see from this slide is that in years gone by, coaching was very much limited to very, very senior people, and often focused on a remedial service. So it was for performance problems rather than performance growth and aspiration, and was very, very largely delivered only by external coaches. But what we now see is that organisations are noticing what the positive, aspirational and forward-moving opportunities that there are from coaching, so that we're not just resolving problems, we are looking at potential and leveraging potential. And coaching now is something that many organisations are very proud, if you like, to say is something that they engage with in their businesses. We also notice that organisations that use coaching well will use a mix of these three areas. So they do still use external coaches for some elements, but they develop internal coaching capability. So there is in-house skill as well, and developing the coaching skills offered by managers and leaders. And the organisations that can get those three things working together in some balance are usually the organisations that most successfully leverage coaching as a resource. There's also some change in the environment around how is coaching evolving. So coaching is a relatively young profession, and it is it's constantly evolving as life and the world is evolving. And so there are some areas here that are hot topics, if you like, in the field of coaching. One of them is around the boundaries between a coach purely eliciting from their client versus giving advice. There's also an increased boundary between this area of coaching or therapy, because of the fact that many coaches are noticing that what clients are bringing are well-being or even mental health challenges into their conversations with stress or burnout. What we do notice is that more and more and more organisations are aware of coaching. We're also seeing a trend that is around perhaps the consideration of having very specialist credentials, specialist qualifications, where people may want to specialise in a certain kind of coaching, like team coaching, for example. There's been an ongoing debate since I became involved in the ICF around, should coaching become a regulated profession, and if so, by who? Who should regulate it? And then a really big area is the use of coaching for social progress and social change. The ICF has a whole area of its organisation called the ICF Foundation that specifically focuses on initiatives to contribute to social change. Another interesting area that's also surfacing is self-care for coaches, because the coaching profession is being drawn upon and leaned upon, if you like, quite heavily. And so coaches also get burnt out. And that is something that is also noticeable in the profession, and therefore it's very important that coaches take care of themselves as well as the people that they're working with. And then, of course, finally, the technology and artificial intelligence, that is a whole nother session we could do just on AI. But that is something that is very much a part of our world and is integrating itself with coaching. And then we also have this idea of the democratization of coaching, in that coaching is now becoming increasingly for the many and not just for the few. And then finally, I wanted to share something with you that I came across just the other day that I was absolutely fascinated by, and I thought I'll share this with you. You may have heard of this, you may not have done, but we have heard in the system for a long time people talk about us being in a state of VUCA, being volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And this state of VUCA has been used many, many, many times to describe how the world is currently, being almost. And what I heard the other day from a futurist organisation was that this term is now starting to be replaced, that VUCA is now an old term, and the new term is bunny. And bunny stands for brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. When I first saw this, I thought, my goodness, these seem like very frightening words. But what I think is about this is that coaching has a great way to support organisations to handle and manage some of these complexities. The idea of being brittle is that something could break very easily. And so if an organisation is not agile, is not flexible, if the leader's mindset is very fixed, it could break easily. And so the agility and the flexibility offered through coaching can help with the breaking and not breaking. Anxiety is one of the biggest emotions that people appear to be feeling at the moment across the world, trends are indicating. And coaching, as we know, can very much help with self-esteem, with well-being, with feeling more confident and grounded. So there is an awful lot of work, I believe, that coaching could do to serve in that space. And then the non-linear part, this is where things don't happen in a straightforward, structured way anymore, that we are changing. And so the idea that coaching can support new thought, new solutions, new awareness, can help to challenge old structures and find new ways of working. And then finally, the incomprehensible is that one of the things that coaches are trained to do is to be a little bit more comfortable with not knowing. And therefore, how could we as coaches support our clients as leaders to be a little bit more comfortable with not knowing? And together we will find our way forward. So I'm going to pause there and stop sharing my screen so that I can see you all a little bit more effectively. There's a lot of information there, and I hope some of it is useful for you. And if anyone would like to ask any questions or share any observations, I would love to hear from you. So I'm opening up the floor to anyone who'd like to bring something in.
Kaan Bey, buyurun.
I can continue in English if you want. Thanks for everyone, and thank you for tonight for inviting us. Thanks, Tracy, for all the detailed knowledge for tonight, and thanks for the Mr. Naji for inviting me. And my question will come from different kind of area, and I would like to really know that how you determine the relationship between technology and coaching. I mean with technology, for example, such as artificial intelligence, and we are talking about these days metaverse. For example, do you think we will be coaching in the metaverse in the near future, for example? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Khan. That's such a marvelous question, $1 million question. Well, what the research is indicating, first of all, is that technology is not going away, and technology is coming into the space of coaching. We already see this with regards to simple things like, you know, we're using technology now. We're not physically together in a big room somewhere, you know, having drinks and food while we're talking. So technology, even by coaching on a Zoom platform, is very common now. We also are seeing coaching via WhatsApp. So, you know, message-based coaching, which particularly for the younger population is very popular. And also recording messages and sending them, often via a platform of WhatsApp. So instead of having a live conversation, the coach and the client record messages to each other and send them. This is also happening. But then we also see more fully automated coaching coming in, which would be bot coaching, where there is an actual program, an avatar, if you like, that is the coach, and how the avatar is simulating a human being. The ICF is doing quite a lot of research on this. However, the early research is indicating that that kind of coaching is very effective, that bots are able to actually create even things like facial expressions that ignite the mirror neurons of empathy in the other person, which you could say is rather frightening for us human beings as coaches of will we become redundant or useless? However, the indication is also that that will not be the case, because ultimately human beings still have choice, and there will, it is believed, still be a lot of need for human being coaches, because that is the choice of the client. Because ultimately, if the client wants to connect with a real person, then that service is still going to be available. However, what it does indicate is that this is where qualifications and regulation potentially come back in, is that it does mean that if we have coaches out there in the world that perhaps are not so well trained and are not so well qualified and are not operating with such standards and professionalism, they may find that they get less and less and less work. And that what will happen is that the profession of coaching from a human being perspective will evolve so that there is a greater and greater expectation on credibility and qualifications and credentials. Great question. Thank you, Khan. I think Mustafa has his hand up.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for allowing me to ask my question. My question is, what was your motivation to pick coaching as a career? Because I feel like majority of the jobs are like me-centered. We work for our own development, but as a coach, you kind of work for other people's development. So I feel like it requires a different kind of motivation and drive. So what was your reason to pick coaching as a job?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, two things actually. I mean, I do think that typically the profile of a coach is someone that does have a high level of intention to support and develop others. I think that's quite a common characteristic. One of the things that encouraged me to become a coach was the fact that I actually used to be a therapist. I used to, in a previous life, I was an addiction therapist working with drug and alcohol addicts. And I found that work very, very difficult because, unfortunately, very few people come through addiction in a very positive way. And I stopped doing that work because I found that I wasn't good enough at the time at protecting myself from those feelings. And so when I discovered coaching, I thought, wow, this is amazing, because this is about the future. This is about potential and growth and what's possible. And I love learning. I value life. I think life is a wonderful gift that we have. And I personally want to get every drop out of it. So I love the concept of coaching that is about potential, of being the best that we can be. But the other thing, which may slightly challenge a little bit, Mustafa, what you said, is, for me at least, coaching is not just about supporting someone else, because I have found that since I immersed myself in being a coach, I have grown so much more than before. I've learned so much more about myself. I feel I know myself more. I've challenged myself more, because I've had to, in learning to be a coach, in being able to be the best coach I can be to others. I have to work on myself. You can only do limited work if you think it's all about other people. You know, we've got to work on ourselves. So that for me has been a great gift, which I don't think I would have had if I'd not, discovered coaching. Thank you for the question, Mustafa. Great question. I can see Nize has her hand up.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everyone. And thank you so much, Tracy. This was really interesting. I want to come back to the shift that you observed, the changes that you observed in terms of coaching needs of the leaders. When I was looking at the list, my impression was that we are actually coming back to more compassionate leadership terms. And that's nothing new, right? It's been around for the past 15 years. And I was just checking on Amazon. There is apparently a kind of a boost of literature on compassionate leadership, publications increasing the past couple of years. But my impression was that both coaching profession and leadership are just becoming more human, in the sense of acknowledging that progression is not always linear, or in the sense of acknowledging the vulnerability embedded into both the profession of coaching but the process of leadership. So I guess my question is more, if you could please, if you don't mind speculating a bit more on what are the things that were already at the core of the coaching business that we kind of need to recycle almost, that we need to make peace with as well? And what is the paradigm shift, if there is any? Because part of me feels like we're actually going back to what was supposed to be normal, if that makes sense. Like, I don't perceive that much of a new normal. I'm feeling more like both in teaching, coaching, but also in leadership, we're actually coming back to the basics of how things were supposed to be more human since the beginning. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I mean, my heart is sort of thumping there, because I think, yes, yes, yes, and I absolutely agree with you. And I notice this in my work, and I notice it in my life connections as well, that there seems to be a real human desire to come back to the heart of what it is to be human. And I do think that what we're seeing coming into coaching is an example of that there is, this idea of compassionate leadership. But the one that also came to my mind when you were speaking there, Nize, was servant leadership as well, where we have a mindset that we are a leader to be in service of others and in service of what we're trying to achieve together. And you know, I personally feel that even pre-pandemic, I have noticed that in many aspects of my work, people seem to have felt a little bit disconnected and lost, or adrift almost, adrift from the connection with themselves, or the sense of purpose of why are we actually doing what we're doing in the way that we're doing it. And I think it's very unfortunate that we've had to have a pandemic to shake things to this extent, but I do believe that some of the things that are surfacing from this, and I notice it myself and in my work, is that there is a return, perhaps not to the way we did things just before, but way back to the way we were meant to be as human beings, is to reconnect ourselves with things like integrity and honesty and compassion and service and connection. Some of the things that in, you know, what we might call our modern way of working, a lot of which has become lost. And if anything, you know, maybe that's why we get so nervous about remote working, because we're all feeling this need for more connection. You know, so I absolutely agree with what you're saying there, Nezet, and I think myself that coaching is a great way to pull that compassion together, to help people find compassion for themselves, as well as for others, you know, in their lives and also in their businesses, in their organizations. Yeah, marvelous. Thank you so much. Tulin.
Tracy, thanks a lot for you being here, for your amazing presentation. And a big thanks to Coaching Company for this great organization again. My question is related with the awareness of coaching. I need to learn your perspective about it. What are the ways of increasing the awareness of coaching in the world?
Yes, thank you for your question. Well, it's interesting because even though the awareness of coaching is increasing, it's still not enough. So there are still a lot of areas within the world where people don't have access to coaching or don't know about coaching. And so one of the things that I've always thought about for myself, and I teach coaches to think about as well, is our role as educators. Is how could we, in our own way, spread the word of what coaching is and what coaching means, you know, and I don't mean that in some kind of evangelical religion or anything like that, but to share with people what is this thing called coaching. And the ICF also does prepare, which is available to members, some very useful materials that we can share with people to say, this is what coaching means, this is how it works, these are the benefits. I think we just need to keep spreading the word. One of the things that I do a lot of is, I guess, is things like this, is talking to people about coaching. And I wonder how could each of us in our different contexts think about opportunities to share what it means. I think the more we can do that, the better. Thank you so much, Tulin.
Anybody else?
Oh, Pina has her hand up.
Yes, so I want to firstly share something, maybe an experience, and that would be more in the context of what Neşe Ceren Hanım said. So I was having a conversation with the coach, this is lately, and this is a senior level person, and later he was telling me about the interview. So the first thing he shared with me was the interview was super straightforward and super serious, and like there was no chat. And so he was a little bit upset about that. And that only, told me in its nature that we as human beings are always in the expectation of having a connection, no matter what the context is, what we are. I mean, that was a job interview. That was not a meeting, whatever. You would expect that it's something already serious and it has to be like that. But he was like, he was not happy about the fact that it went through like that. So that's something maybe to add on to that. We as leaders and all the leaders we work, they have to be maybe more cautious about that, more connected to people. And yeah, after this, I don't know, maybe you can say something about it later. And I have a question for you, Tracy. So this is about the artificial intelligence, use of artificial intelligence in coaching. So here in the States, very often I come across companies that have developed an app, which, you can just subscribe and get coaching. It could be anything about, health and well-being or habit building, or just like normal daily coaching. So maybe as an old school person myself, I was not very sympathetic about these developments and whatever. So how do you see that personally? Is it really the future of coaching? Can you say that? Or I don't know, you already told that ICF has some positive statements about that, but I want to take your personal view about that.
Yeah, thank you, Pinar. I mean, I guess the research will tell us more as we get more research on this, because it's changing all the time. I think there's a difference between AI being the future of coaching and AI being part of the future of coaching. I don't personally believe that AI will, make the human race redundant completely from coaching, but I think it will be a part of coaching. And I think if we resist it and we fight against it, we may lose. Because I think the opportunity here is for us as coaches also perhaps to be flexible and agile and open, all of those things that we invite our clients to do, we have to sort of challenge ourselves to do as well, and maybe think about, how can I embrace AI? How could I leverage AI to support my work rather than be fearful of it as a competitor to myself almost? So I do think it will be a part of the profession of coaching, and I still believe that there is a great space for great coaches, great human coaches. And just back to your other point that you were making before, Pinar, about connection, I absolutely agree, and one of the things that is noticeable, as I mentioned before, about coaching is this sense of partnership. So a coaching relationship is intended to be a very close connection with a high level of safety and openness and trust and rapport. And interestingly, research indicates that the nature and the quality of the relationship between the coach and their client accounts for at least 40% of the success of that work. And I believe that that same kind of principle would apply to leaders and their teams. It's the nature and the quality of these relationships, and the better the relationship, the better the outcome is likely to be. And that's where I think coaching is so valuable, because through coaching we can extend the skills and the principles of coaching beyond the coach and into other people, just in terms of the way we communicate with each other. And that's where as I said at the very beginning, I'm starting to think about myself. I'm starting to think about coaching as something that is not really just a skill that certain people have. I'm thinking about coaching as a way of communicating with ourselves and each other that we should all have. You know, that is part of the range of how we communicate. And of course, coaching is not appropriate all of the time, but coaching would be a very, very valuable addition to anybody's communication skills, I feel, in any setting. I'm doing a lot of work at the moment, for example, in education and with teachers and university students, and just how they communicate with themselves through coaching can have such a positive impact. So absolutely agree with you there, Pinar, about the connection. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And let's check
Now,
if
is
there's
there anybody
anyone
else? Maybe we can just summarize. Huh?
Yes, and yeah, I think I cannot see any more hands now. So we would like to thanks once again to Tracy for sharing so much valuable input and information with us tonight here. And so we've, you know, I'm sure maybe we have heard many things that we heard before, but also some things that we haven't heard before. That's first time for us, like this Buka to Bunny. It was new for me. And so many things about coaching culture, the Prism Award like that ICF has started with the corporations. And yeah, that we've touched base the technology and artificial intelligence in coaching. And I think everyone has their own output and their own, you know, thing to put in their pockets. So we would like to thanks once again. And
so donated to a school training association called Darüşşafaka. You know very well. They are supporting children who has no father or mother or both. So we have donated to them for on behalf of Tracy to thank her. Thank you very much, Tracy. It was really great, marvelous, perfect. I cannot say anything else. So thank you, really, really, really.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really grateful. I'm very touched about the tree and the donation, and that's very, very kind of you. It is my absolute pleasure to be here with you. I do hope that something is useful for you, and please know that whatever you're doing, taking coaching forwards into the world in some way is making a really positive difference. I truly believe that. So thank you so much, and for spending some time with me. It's been really lovely. Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you very much.